Hey guys, Jay Morales here. We're once again here to cover one of Ableton Live's instruments. This week, we're covering Sampler. So last week I covered Simpler. Now this week, we're going to cover its little brother called Sampler. Super powerful, very similar to what we covered last week, but this one has a little bit more features and you're able to do a lot of other more creative things with it. So I'm going to show you guys really in depth of what it can do and a whole array of things that you're able to do just from having one sample in your sampler. So let's get to it. Let's go! All right, guys, we are here in Ableton Live now. And today we are covering the sampler instrument from Ableton Live. So last week we did Simpler. This week we're gonna do the sampler. It's little brother. So we pull this up right here, pull it into a new MIDI track. As you can see, it looks kind of similar to the Simpler. One cool trick, if you want to switch in between a sampler and Simpler, you just have to right click and you can toggle between the two. So Sampler, this has actually been with Ableton Live a long time. And it's a very powerful little instrument rack. So I'm just going to pull a sample in here. Let's see what we can. Yeah, something like this. Let's see. Maybe this right here. Okay. So we have this loop right here. Right? Ooh, eerie. So cool. Now we have this loop. A few of the basics. You have zone, where I'm going to explain this in a minute. Sample, where your sample is. Pitch. We will go through this. You can basically do frequency modulation and amplitude modulation within the rack. We have a pitch envelope. The Simpler from last week, we covered something similar to this. So make sure you go back and watch that. If you haven't, filter, pretty straightforward. We covered this also in the lesson last week. Simpler does have it as well. Modulation, and then MIDI. So let's start with zone. So this is something that's really cool about this. So basically what you can do is pull a bunch of different samples. So let's say I wanted to play with all these samples right here. Excuse me. You want to play with all these samples right here? You can just pull them in. And so what it does is it puts them in equal amounts. So it's basically playing them all at the same time, but that's not what we want. What we want is to be able to assign it to a different piece of the keyboard. So in order to do that, we'll just right click and then we'll distribute ranges equally. So once we do that, you see that it distributes them along the keyboard. So I'm playing this, and then I'm in the other one, then I'm in the other one, and then on and on and on. So now you're able to toggle throughout a bunch of different samples all in one rack. So that's super cool. It works the same with drums. So if we were to delete all this, and let's say if we pull in some drums, let's just put drums and see what we come up with. Big Fish. Let's go to one of my favorite right here, Gold Baby. Boom. So we're just going here, get all these drums. Just grab them, select them, boom, put them in here. Same deal. Distribute ranges equally, and now pretty cool. You can also set up the velocity for each one, and this will also enable you to edit the zones by themselves. So if you wanted to pick a zone for each one, you could do it that way, but it's very tedious and time consuming. So just go to key, make sure you distribute your ranges equally, and now you got a whole array of things to do all in one. Cool. And now you can control everything too from one single sampler, which is super awesome. So you don't have to keep sifting through samples and changing things around. You can just kind of play and have really a creative advantage from my point of view, just because you can kind of test out things on multiple sounds, not just one. Okay, cool. Now we're gonna go back to what our little pad that we had. Where you at? There you go. Okay, so we're gonna delete all this. Okay, something like this. Cool. We'll drop it in here. So now we have it in the keyboard. All right, so a few basic things here. You can reverse it. We had this in our sampler in Simpler last week. Snap, it just basically snaps it to grid. You can switch the sample here if you wanted to. You just have to press this little button right here, and you can toggle to a different sample. You just have to pick it, and it automatically loads it in there. So that's pretty awesome. Okay, let's go back to the one we had. I think this one. Okay, cool. Volume. You can just set up the volume from here. You can also set up the sample start. So if you want the sample to start in a different place, you can just go ahead and move that around. You can also do it manually with the cursor, you know, with the mouse right here. Either way, there's just two different ways of doing things. The sample end, which is the opposite, you know, if you want to cut something short. These different sustain modes. So what this does is you're able to loop things. So this is just a regular on. I don't think you can do it this one. We're gonna have to choose a different sound. Let's try this one. Let's see if we're able to do it. It won't let me do it. Oh, because it's off. Okay. Rookie mistake. All right. So we have this pad right here. Now, this is just a sustain mode which is on, so it doesn't really do anything. Now, if we go to the next sustain mode, you start getting into basically a loop. You can enable the loop function within the sampler. So you can choose the loop start and end, and it'll just basically keep looping through. You can also do forward and backwards. The arrows are a really good way of just, you know, seeing what's happening within, you know, within the action. So this one basically just goes through the sample from where you the sample start, and then the region that you picked, it'll loop forward and backwards instead of doing just a sample from the beginning of the sample start. Okay, you can link it if you want it. It basically links the sample start with the loop start, so you'll see that it shifts over. Cool. The release mode. This is actually you'll see this. So this is just the mode of release. Same deal. Beginning. Separately the release portion, and then forwards and backwards release. Cool. Cool. All right, here, same deal. You can choose the loop start, loop end. You can also choose crossfade. We also went through this last week in our simpler functions. So you can basically just crossfade between the ends of the loop, so to eliminate any clicks or anything like that. Detune function. interpolation, this is basically just the way that the samples are transposed. The best interpolation will give you, the less kind of transposition noise. So that's just for you to choose, kind of mess around with that. What else is down here? You got pan, scale. So this is just the relationship of the note that's coming in from the keyboard into the sampler. Cool. I think that does it for here. I think these are the channel selectors, so you can do both mono, left, right. And then this is also a volume control for your sample. All right, so now we will move on to the pitch section. So in the pitch section, as I was saying before, you're able to basically have an oscillator modulate your sound. So what that means is you can either do frequency modulation, which is you choose a frequency and it modulates it. Well, I'll show you in a minute. And then you can do amplitude. So basically what that means is volume. It's a volume modulation. So anyway, without further ado, we're gonna go to the frequency modulation. So these controls right here equate to these right here. So you'll see that they move as you move the little squares. So initial attack. Let's see, this is the slope. This is in case you want to do little curves. Cool. Then we have the attack. Another slope. It's a decay slope. Then we have just the plain decay. This is, I think, our release slope. It's not collaborating. Here we go. Release slope. And then our end or release. Cool. Then velocity. Okay. This is basically, depending on how hard you hit the key, it'll act on it. So then you choose the function. Do you want it to loop? Do you want it to be for every beat? Sync or trigger, basically, which triggers every time that you hit the note. So I usually just leave it on sync or even trigger. Now for the important part, which is this right here. So you're gonna choose what type of frequency modulation you want to do. So do you want to do a sine wave? Do you want to do a tri-wave? There's square. There's a bunch of different ways right here that you can try out. So let's just go for like a sine 8-bit. And here you're gonna choose how much is gonna affect the sound. So you see how, as I turn it up, you can hear the wave come in. So I'm starting to lose a little bit of the actual sound, but you can hear the modulation here. So as I turn it up, pretty cool, right? Then you can choose the volume or velocity. So and this basically allows you to get the effect if you hit harder on the key. So if I have it here, if I go really hard or really slow, you won't barely hear it. But if I hit the key hard, you'll really get that effect. And then you can choose how the effect creeps in right here. Do you want it to start from the beginning or do you want it to slowly come up? Right? You can choose the coarseness. So this is basically the the tuning of the wave, the frequency. You can fine tune it right here. And now you can also do another thing, which is you can actually choose the frequency of the wave. So this is really helpful if you're trying to emulate a certain frequency for a certain key. So you can actually just choose the frequency on here. And then how many multiples of demodulation do you want? So pretty cool, super helpful. This is good on kicks if you want to put a sine wave, put a little crunch on it. add a little bottom end. Super cool. And then we'll go into the amplitude modulation. Same deal, but this is going to be controlling volume. So you see that it doesn't take away so much of the sound. That's because it's going off of amplitude, which is just volume versus adding frequency. So you get a different type of effect here. You can try a different wave. So you see that you start to get different types of effects. Depending on what you do. So pretty cool thing to use. Experiment with it and see what you can come up with. All right. So we're going to turn this baby off, go to the pitch envelope. Now, same deal here with these parameters. They're all right here. So what we can do is choose the amount of semitones that you want the pitch envelope to be affected. So if I choose 24, this is really good if you're trying to come up with an effect or something like that. You can really elongate it. So this can also help you make your own kicks. You just need something like a sine wave. You can make all types of really plucky and percussive sounds with it. Super cool. This is spread, so this basically spreads out the sound. In the stereo field, transposition, up or down, however many semitones you want. If you want to fine tune, you do it by sense. This is transposing the keys in the zone editor, and then glide. This is what we covered last week between the keys. It basically you use portamento for polyphonic sounds, and then the other one, which is glide, you use for monophonic sounds, so bass, all that sort of stuff. Cool. All right, so that's pitch and oscillation. Let's turn this off. Now onto the filter section. We covered this last week in the simpler module, so make sure you go back and refer to that, but we'll go over it quickly. Now you got your filter, basically low pass filter, high pass filter, band pass, belt pass, and then this is a combination of the two. Alright, so pretty self-explanatory. Resonance, if you just turn it up, turns up the resonance. You can choose the type of circuit. This I also covered last week, which was all the different types of circuits that you can use. The slope, and this is a really cool thing. So there's basically 3 ways to drive the signal through the filter. So it has a drive in it already. You have a shaper right here. So basically there's 2 different settings. So if it's in the up arrow, the shaper output feeds the filter, and then if you turn it the other way, the filter's output feeds the shaper. So it's also right here in the little help module, which is super helpful. Always refer to that if you have any questions of how things are routed, how things are used. Super helpful. All right, so you can either feed the shaper or the other way around to feed the filter. You can choose the type of distortion that you want. Do you want hard, which is this kind of hard distortion? Then you have sine, different type of distortion. Then 4-bit. It really gets really crunchy. And then you have the softer distortion, which is not so harsh. All right, pretty cool. Let's turn the shaper off. Now, for the filter envelope, this relates to this right here. So it's not active right now because I haven't turned up the amount. But once I turn it up, you can see that it starts to affect the actual filter right here. So let's see. You see? So if I move it, I don't get this. I just kind of get the filter going in kind of slowly. So you can play around with this if you want the filters to come in like that, or if you just want it to come straight up, and that's it. So it's kind of up to you, but you can see how it starts to affect the filter. So this is just basically an envelope control for the filter. Cool. Then volume, pretty self-explanatory. This is basically your amplitude control. So how much of the sound do you want to hear or not? Velocity, which controls depending on how much you hit the key. It'll give you more sound or less sound. So these controls relate to these right here, so you'll see them moving. And then we have pan, left, right, or left, right, the backwards, random panning, time. So this will basically, like it says here, it will shrink or expand the length of all envelopes in sampler. So it seems like a pretty random thing. I don't use it. Have no idea what it's for. Never used it. This one either. Proportionally shrink or expand the length of an envelope in sampler relative to the pitch incoming MIDI. Never used it, but weird. The amount of voices that you have. So if you have a polyphonic sound, you can either turn it mono or however many voices you want it to have. So let's just say 4. And this is RAM. If you wanted to run the samples from RAM instead of your hard disk, you can do it right here. Turn it on and off. Cool. Next, modulation. This is pretty cool. The simpler has something similar. It's basically a low frequency oscillator. So it oscillates the sound, as you can hear. You're hearing what it does. It's pretty cool. You can also use it as a filter. You can use it as volume. So the volume goes up or down. You can do panning, left or right. And then you can also do pitch. And depending on the amount of that you put right here, it'll affect it more and more. So you can do retrigger, which starts all over when you hit the key, or it just keeps going wherever you left it off. You can choose the type of modulation. So if you want to do square, sounds different. You can also almost get an arpeggiated type of feel here. You hear that? And then the key, which relates to the pitch of the incoming MIDI notes, which is really important. Cool. So you have three types of LFOs here. You can use them in multiple ways. So if you want to have one 16th and another one a quarter, and then another one an eighth, you can play around with those, and it does all types of really crazy modulations. So you can use one for panning, one for pitch, and one for regular. So that's really cool. Okay, this is if you have an aux, so basically this is an auxiliary channel, which you could toggle an auxiliary envelope. So if you have an envelope that's coming from somewhere else, let's say like your LFO, you can modulate it that way. So it's pretty cool, but haven't really used it that much. Cool. Now we go on to this section, which is the MIDI. So from here, this is basically a MIDI matrix for the sampler. So if we're gonna do something like, let's say we'll have the velocity, so however hard I hit the key, handle the LFO rate. So where are you at, LFO? Let's see if we can turn the filter. So what you're noticing here is that if I hit the key hard, you get a really, really fast LFO, but if I hit it slowly, I get a really much slower LFO rate. So basically what's happening is I'm routing the velocity of the keyboard to the LFO rate. So the harder I hit it, the harder it goes, and the slower I hit it, the slower it goes. So that's pretty cool, just to be able to use it with velocities and stuff. So pretty cool thing to do. You can route it to a bunch of different things here if you want, play around with that. You can do to pitch, loop start, or volume oscillator, the filter envelope. I mean, the possibilities here are endless with all these different things that you can, excuse me, that you can route these to. So play around with those, try it. If you failed, try something else. A lot of this is trial and failure, so don't get discouraged. It's part of learning, part of the creative process. So if you get stuck, try something else. Feel free to leave comments down below if something was not clear or you don't understand it. Please feel free. Happy to answer your questions. All right, so that's pretty much it for the sampler. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, drop a comment below. I am Jay Morales Music on all the socials, so follow my content if you like it, and I will see you guys in the next tutorial. Peace. Hope you guys enjoyed it.